Okay, so yeah, welcome everybody. Once again, I'm going to just introduce this as a study of the Pathwork lectures that are in a compilation book called The Pathwork of Self Transformation. And so these are also online for free at pathwork.org, and the books are available now through Amazon and also on Kindle. And we're reading through this book because this is a kind of a compilation of some of the, foundational lectures and really interesting lectures that are good to kind of take in as an introduction to what the pathwork is. So this is a particularly useful lecture, I think, in many, many ways. Um, it's called The Real God and the God Image. And so there's a little commentary right before the lecture starts uh, by the editors. It says, no one can avoid facing the question of God. Does such a being actually exist? How and where can I find God? And what is the truth behind the answers I have given myself so far, or behind the confusion I feel? And what can the pathwork guide, an entity of higher consciousness, an entity with an angel's eye view, teach us that we have not read or heard before? So the guide continues, greetings, I bring you blessings in the name of God. Blessed is this hour, my dearest friends. That the existence of God is so often questioned, and that divine presence is so rarely experienced within the human soul, is the result of the distorted God image most human beings harbor. So, the false concept of God. Children experience their first conflict with authority at an early age. They also learn that God is the highest authority. Therefore, it is not surprising that children project their subjective experiences with authority onto their imaginings about God. Hence, a wrong conclusion is formed about God, which is unconsciously carried into adulthood. And in some ways, I find that the God image goes into sort of our image of life in general. Like the events of fate, the things that befall us that seem bigger than we are. So don't think just in terms of sort of some particular religious belief or understanding of God, but it's kind of like whatever seems to be larger than us, and we all sort of woke up here, don't know why we're here or what's going on, right? And sometimes it's a little scary or painful. So there's a lot of ways that into this unknown, we try to write the story and project and try to understand what our relationship is to this much larger thing called life, the world, the universe, God. And so again, from an early age, we kind of are projecting our experience with also authority that we encounter in our own, personal lives. So children experience all, I think that's supposed to be kinds of authority. When they are prohibited from doing what they enjoy most, they experience authority as hostile. When parental authority indulges a child, authority will be felt as benign. When there is a predominance of one kind of authority in childhood, the reaction to that will become the unconscious attitude towards God. In many instances, however, children experience a mixture of both. And then the combination of these two kinds of authority will form their image of God. In the measure that a child experiences fear and frustration, to that measure will fear and frustration unconsciously be felt toward God. God is then believed to be a punishing, severe, and often even unfair and unjust force that one has to contend with. I know, my friends, that you do not think so consciously, But in the pathwork, you are asked to find the emotional reactions that do not at all correspond to your conscious concepts on whatever subject. The less the unconscious concept coincides with the conscious one, the greater is the shock when one realizes the discrepancy. But this is really sort of it's healing in some way, to realize, oh, there's this, despite what we have intellectually, formulated and chosen to believe, that often in this deeper unconscious emotional realm of our being, we have other beliefs and attitudes. And it's part of the work that we do to kind of bring those into the light of consciousness. And it does get buried or hidden, as we grow up, beyond our childhood. But if it doesn't get addressed or looked at consciously and resolved, then it remains inside and still affects our life experience. So it says practically everything the child enjoys most is forbidden. Whatever gives most pleasure is prohibited, usually for the child's own welfare. This the child cannot understand. It happens that parents also do this out of their own ignorance and fear. Thus, it is impressed on the child's mind that for everything most pleasurable in the world, one is subject to punishment from God, the highest and sternest authority. In addition, you are bound to encounter human injustice in the course of your life, in childhood as well as in adulthood, particularly if these injustices are perpetrated by people who stand for authority and are therefore unconsciously associated with God. Your unconscious belief in God's severe injustice is strengthened. Such experiences also intensify your fear of God. So, again, often in the lectures, I find, that he's describing things sort of in a sort of black or white, kind of very specific way. So you may not find exactly this reflected in yourself, but if you take the general understanding and think about it or feel into it a little bit, and just imagine sort of what, not what you think, but how you feel God feels towards you, right? And whether you feel, God as kind of a critic or a kind of, a bar that you have to, work up to, or, be acceptable to, and that kind of thing. Or whether you can feel, a kind of benign, supportive presence for yourself, or maybe a combination in some way of both. Does anyone else want to, um, share like what their sense of their own God image might be? This place will keep, unlayering it, unmasking it more and more. But does anybody have a sense at this point?
I'm really not sure because in one moment it feels like I feel like I have the power to have a relationship. Like, so I see it as it's my job to reach out to something that's always there. And then in another thing, I feel like it is kind of like a like I feel like it's something that's judgy and abandoning. And so it's not a constant.
Right, great. So that's it. I mean, like we have this kind of, again, a duality or a split inside, and some, our higher self may have even experience of, and certainly, most of us, have some sense when we look out at the amazement of the universe, and then whether it's, like God is personally for or against us, or, is involved in that personal way, but so consciously we may not really be clear, but unconsciously we do often feel inside, like this kind of that we're not, worthy, and we have to perform, or we have to try to, live up to something, um, to receive God's favor, and maybe that's, just that God loves us and doesn't always give us everything we want and always give us our way. But, it's partly, like it's kind of like relationship. And I was listening to something, channeling from Metatron recently, talking about, this new influx, and, how important, sort of the most fundamental aspect, of the universe is this, relationship with everything. And that's really what we're here to do, is to, learn and work with this relationship. And so that includes, I think, our relationship with divinity, with creator beings, with the divine qualities, with, the divine, our own inner divine, and, maybe some, like archetype or personification that we might help us relate again, because, even in the Bible, it kind of quotes Jesus as saying, I think, and this is in the book of John, like, you can't see God, God's invisible. And so, I came here so you could see what God is like. The incarnation of that, energy in the flesh. And so there's this, um, way that it can be demonstrated, in some sense. But, in many of the spiritual stories, it doesn't, just because, God cares for us, it doesn't necessarily mean that, like we have it easy, or we're always rewarded and get what we want in life, which is a kind of, I think, some of our culture, and some of, like, prosperity Christianity, I think, sort of goes in that direction a little bit. But all of these things are different aspects of God image. And then even, nature, and for a long time, nature, was considered a force of, malevolence almost, or at least challenging to human beings, and, not, not so easy. And now, of course, in a way, we've romanticized it, and because we don't have to be immersed in it to such a degree. But we also have, I think, a deeper reclaiming of the beauty and the, spirituality of the vibration of all of nature, and this sense of relationship again to it, that, isn't a survival of the fittest kind of relationship, but more can, be, learning to love and, be one with it again, in some new way, maybe. So yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, I've been pondering this, only because it's come up in another group, but so I was reading, and when we talk about it, comes in from a lot of spiritual traditions, Zen and the art of archery. In the introduction, it says, "Man is a thinking reed, but his great works are done when he is not calculating and thinking. Childlikeness has been restored with long years of training in the art of self-forgetfulness. When this is attained, man thinks, yet he does not think. He thinks like the showers coming down from the sky. He thinks like the waves rolling on the ocean. He thinks like the stars illuminating the nightly heavens. He thinks like the green foliage shooting forth and relaxing in spring breeze. Indeed, he is the showers, the ocean, the stars, and the foliage."
Beautiful.
Yeah, we come back to that connection that we disconnect somehow.
Yeah, exactly. And when we can feel, that, that beauty there, and also, somehow feel like not small in the midst of it, but also seen, in our little place, or also, understood as a channel in a unique way, for that brilliance that's everywhere around us, so that there's this kind of, I like Ken Wilber talks about, that you can have an understanding of what he calls a first person, a second person, and a third person God. And so it's another way of sort of looking at the concepts of God, which are, God images as well, So like the first person God is often in the, awakening traditions and Eastern traditions where, it's like, I am that, and, I and God are one, that there is this, essential nature of divinity that is within each of us and is our essential I. And then there's the second person God. And I think this is really important in some of our path work because, like, we're still working with maturing the child consciousness. And I think if we're incarnated in this world, it's like we have to, love and honor and hold, the child consciousness, even the lower self and the mask and the defenses, around that in a way, because there's this sort of, way that we're, you know, always going to be vulnerable children here on earth. And we don't know. We don't have, like the guide says, we don't have perspective enough to understand always what's happening. And sometimes it's painful and it hurts. And so, where we may not have even had parents that were very available for us, um, we have adapted in some form, but and even if we had really available parents, they may have passed on, or it's really as we become adults, it's not like we need to be parented by other people, but I think that child part of us does, and so there's this way that I think the second person God, this I thou relationship, feels like the relationship between my inner child and God. And that's the one where the inner child can, ask and present her struggle or her pain, or, come and run into his lap when she's suffering instead of run away feeling ashamed. Right? Him, her, I don't, it's like the divine is for me, often I'm using the masculine just because it's sort of traditional, but I think of it in terms of, both. And sometimes I'm calling on the divine mother because that feels like the energy that I want, and other times I'm calling on the divine father. But I think that it's good to have some place for these, child needs within us, these transferential needs for benevolent wisdom that's, larger than us, to be in relationship and to be able to reach out for that, to ask, to seek, you know, beyond our self. And ultimately, I guess that's all the same as, activating or seeking sort of the deeper real nature of our own being and our own higher self. But I think it just sort of depends on which part of me is in need that who might I be going to, right? And then the third person God I like a lot too, because it's kind of like that's the way God is showing up in my soul journey. That's the way that the destiny is unfolding, the encounters that I have. And that's also what you were reading, Michelle, around, like being able to be very present to, the whole universe. And so there's your own personal story and your own journey. Um, and then, to be in the experience directly of the beauty around you, of nature, of, yeah, of even the pain around you, right? So here we are, dealing with, a lot of suffering on the planet right now as well. I found Tara Brock had a really good, I think, blog on the situation that I highly recommend. I put it on my Facebook page. I don't know if you're friends, but if you can research Tara Brock's last blog, she's a mindfulness instructor. If you don't know, and I find she has some good things. So, um, but we're all just like trying to hold, and find our way forward in all of this, and so to the degree that we don't even believe in God, which is really now more and more. I think I was listening to something that was saying like up to 80% of the, younger generation do not have any religious, spiritual background, tradition, identification. Now, some of them are, spiritual, not religious, kind of category. But there is, again, the community and that, way of, working with that. And, so we're, kind of in this place where, like adolescents, we're throwing over the authorities, the parents, we're going to be free, we're going to act out, we're going to just, all, still be in this adolescent, process, which is part of the development, right? So hopefully we will in the process also come to choose a kind of deeper, willingness to contain our own energies, and of course, as these energies are coming in and they're very intense and people are being affected in their lives and trust is so low and, people are feeling so vulnerable and, everybody is reacting out of their own traumas, ancestral and personal, it's like all of this is just bubbling out and for us to learn how to ground and have a container for our own our own feelings that brings up, right? So that we can center ourselves a little more and not also be sort of tempted into more reactivity. And so we can work with sort of holding peace for ourselves. But back to the God image and the God lecture. So, uh, he's talking about, this need for pleasure, this desire for life that we have, right? And how sometimes, it's true boundaries of safety and appropriateness, and other times, fear of the culture or the people that, like limit uh, the expression and the ability of the child to, have that. And so there's that disappointment, frustration, and then addition says you are bound to encounter human injustice, right? And in childhood as well as in adulthood. And injustice, there's a whole lecture on the pain of injustice. And the guide says that this is a particularly, deep, deep pain because if injustice really does exist, it kind of shakes the very foundation of our, ability to be in life. Now, he says ultimately that, again, because we can't see the whole big picture, we don't recognize that there always is justice and that there is no real such thing as injustice. But we're here right now also in this time where, all of these, groups, whether it's ethnic or it's, gender or, all of these kinds of things that, race that are coming up. And again, there's been impact, and suffering that people have had as they've, you know, gone through their experiences, in this world with sort of our dominant culture. And, we're, even all of us have been impacted in various degrees because women are also kind of among that minority or not really totally part of that dominant culture. And then we come from different cultures as well. Uh, so there's different ways that, all of this is coming out now, and we're trying to navigate this idea of, what is self responsibility? What is my responsibility to, have, maybe become aware of unconscious impact that I might have on people that I don't realize I'm, you know, numb to or tuned out to, or, those kinds of things. But in the long run, it's like all of the apparent injustice in the world is, something that, we often see as something like about God, right? The outer, if something befalls us that, it didn't seem like we had anything to do with, and then it doesn't feel fair. I don't know. Does anybody have experiences like that? Like this place in you that says God's justice isn't just, or, the feeling of it's not fair. that this happened? Or do you just accept that everything that happens in life is fair, or you deserved it, or do you blame yourself and shame yourself for it? So maybe I'm losing people a little bit. Let's see if we can go back to the lecture and just so there's this way that oftentimes all this forms an image that if you properly analyze it can make it a monster out of God. And so the God living in our unconscious mind is really more of a Satan or an inner, you know, critical parent, or a sort of, we can make it into, like the the reason why we suffer. So, or if it's not, because God is bad and does it to us, it's because we're not good enough to win God's favor. Right? And you can see how these things, are subtle in our unconscious, and you may reject this on your conscious level, but you may begin to see it in some of the times when you're affected, and your child consciousness is triggered a little more by things in life. Any comments? So you yourself have to find out in your work on yourself how much of this holds true for you personally. Is your soul impregnated with similar wrong concepts? If and when the realization of such an impression becomes conscious within a growing human being, it is often not understood that this concept of God is false. And then the person turns away from God altogether and wants no part of the monster discovered hovering in his or her mind. I think this is also why people have left religion. It's like because we're now conscious enough to recognize, the God of fear, the God of judgment, the God, probably doesn't make sense to us anymore, right? But we're not replacing it with anything in some way. We're just rejecting. And so it says this, by the way, is often the true reason for someone's atheism. The turning away is just as erroneous as the opposite extreme, which consists of fearing a God who is severe, unjust, pious, self-righteous, and cruel. The person who unconsciously maintains the distorted God image rightly fears this deity and resorts to cajoling for favors. Here you have a good example of two opposite extremes, both of which lack truth to an equal extent. So let us now examine the case in which a child experiences benign authority to a greater degree than fear and frustration with a negative authority. Let us assume that overindulging and doting parents fulfill the child's every whim. They do not instill a sense of responsibility in the child so that he or she can get away with practically anything. The God image resulting from such a condition is at first an superficial sight closer to a true concept of God, forgiving, good, loving, indulgent. This causes the personality to unconsciously think he or she can get away with anything in the eyes of God, can cheat life and avoid self-responsibility. To begin with, such a child will know much less fear. But since life cannot be cheated, this wrong attitude will produce conflicts, and therefore fear will be generated by a chain reaction of wrong thinking, feeling, and action. An inner confusion will arise since life as it is in reality does not correspond to the indulgent unconscious God image and concept. So, we may, kind of hope and believe, and then it's always a big shock, when something pulls us up or, whatever. And, oftentimes that also causes us maybe to turn away from our, belief in God, but we're really kind of got more like a belief in Santa Claus, right? So many subdivisions and combinations of these two main categories can exist in the same soul. And the development achieved in former incarnations in this particular respect also influences the psyche. So we're not coming in as blank slates in terms of our understanding and relationship with God. Now I think the child consciousness is always affected by the wound and the kind of pain body consciousness. And so that's where the God image that's often in distortion comes from. It is very important, therefore, my friends, to find out what your God image is. This image is basic and determines all other attitudes, images, and patterns throughout your life. So I don't know, we talked earlier on one of these lectures about the idealized self image, and this is the God image. And so, the guide uses this term very specifically about these kind of overgeneralized impressions or beliefs or attitudes that we have. Um, and so, how we think we should be is our self image, and how we believe God you know, is the God image. But again, it may not be that conscious, belief, but more the childlike attitude towards how, we want God to be, or how our parents were if they were not indulgent. Maybe we've imprinted this kind of negative authority. And so God becomes that kind of authority in our inner understanding. So do you have a sense of, I mean, most of the time, if you think back in life, you might have, had a time when you felt like, maybe God was punishing you or you did something wrong, and, you had a bad result or, unexpected, difficulty in life. And, it's kind of like your consciousness may have rejected it, but at some point, your mind might have, had a thought at least, oh, maybe I did something, that caused this, right? And I don't know what it was, but I must have done something bad. Do you recognize that at all?
I don't I don't know. I'm trying to think of it. Usually I don't really blame. I think I might just accept things as they are, and it takes me depending on what it is, couple hours to couple days, and then I just
So when you're not accepting things as you are in that process of getting to that acceptance, you want to pay attention, like what are you feeling and believing? Because that's the deeper reactivity of the child consciousness that you're, doing the work with, transforming. But, if we're, you might be, it might be useful in some ways to,
mm,
somehow like how the, you know,
mm, yeah, now I kind of remember that, like, from a very young age, like, that injustice, like seeing the pattern of injustice in adults, it
uh
really triggered me at some point, and I made a promise to myself not to be like them. It's like
right,
very, um, kind of like I will never, I don't know, step on people's heads and, like, to get my way or something like that. Um, but yeah, that's where I felt the injustice. That's
right.
not,
How come God doesn't punish them, and why do you have to still struggle sometimes or suffer sometimes, right?
but then in itself also, I think that's sort of, I mean, of course, it depends on the situation, but it's in itself, it could be very much holding yourself to those standards. It's could be very limiting too.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a God in there? It's another question. I don't know. Um,
Well, again, again, some, religious beliefs, for instance, that are, handed down, and children are raised under it and, for a while may even accept it or maybe, stay with it their whole life, that, there is a hell that God, is measuring you and, and you better, kind of be aware that you have a mortal soul and it could be in danger of offending God, right? And so you have to mind your P's and Q's and not, go doing anything that God would, judge you for.
But
And
then you ask, sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, you go ahead.
Then you ask yourself like a question, so if you do it, what happened? Then you dig deeper and deeper, and there is a deeper belief in that you're not gonna be looked at as, as the good person. You're not gonna be, loved by your parents, your mom, that deeper fear you kind of unveil. That's
Right.
yeah.
Right. It's it is a projection, probably, but it's very easy to, like the guide is saying. So, we're taught that, God is kind of the highest authority. And some parents, I mean, I don't know how much it is now anymore, but, would use, like, oh, God's gonna be, mad at you, or, if you don't do what I say, kind of scare us into
Mm-hmm.
and then there's also, the preaching of some, ministers or whatever that kind of teach us also that, there is this, kind of parental authority figure type of God that, is ultimate authority. And then it's interesting in the Bible because you see, that more in the Old Testament, and then in the New Testament, there seems to be a different teaching coming through in some way, and it's almost like so that even maybe in the collective consciousness, of mankind, it's a transition from sort of the divine as strictly this, authority that's up in the sky, that's, controlling and judging, to, this also this understanding like that God is in our brothers and sisters, God is here on earth, God is love, God is forgiveness, God is like a more of a relational being that is, where we can unify with and we can, be like Jesus is more like a good friend than, an authority on high, a sort of presentation, and at least in some of the, Christianity that I was raised in, and God is love. God is not, hellfire and brimstone, right? So there's these different, but all of these in some ways are different God images, and different ways of looking at them. And then, like the guide is saying, sort of in our deep unconscious, each one of us has a kind of combination of this that is active and in our being in some way, particularly as we encounter challenges that are bigger than we are and outside of us or whatever, and then, do we pray? Do we ask? Do we seek? Do we go to God with our needs, or do we feel that that's immature, or, God doesn't care about us? All of these are forms of God image, right?
I feel now that, or maybe I sort of believe in the fact that the more you in the present, the more you'll be able to hear the voice, the truest voice of God or whatever it is coming from, and it's in the presence. Its voice, it's in the presence. The more present you are.
Right. So that would be the real God rather than the God image, right? So that's what part where this lecture is doing, is helping us realize that there is a real God, and then there is our God images. And we need to be able to recognize the difference. And, and yeah, it's like the real God is experienced in becoming present, right? But our inner child, sometimes is present and sometimes is not, or whatever, right? And sometimes, we're being a container for that and a healer for the wounds that the inner child bears, and so some part of the healing that we might have to give to our inner child is, to go in, and help her know the real God, because she was imprinted with fear of God somehow, deep down inside.
Mm-hmm.
So, or fear of being bad, right? And so, you may know that you're okay, but the child may not, and the child may, feel, like that it's particularly important not to be bad, because, like God might, not love her if she isn't or something like that. And we can, these things, it's amazing to feel them inside of us in these, deeper places. And, if you don't recognize them maybe directly in yourself, you may be able to recognize, the feelings in others. And we're ultimately, all one. And we have certain, things that we're more of, or more focused on in each incarnation. But so let's go ahead into the dissolving of the God image and see what it has to say. Any other comments before we move on? So now the question of how to dissolve such an image arises. How do you dissolve any image? That is, any wrong conclusion. First, you have to become fully conscious of the wrong concept. The second step is to set your intellectual ideas straight. So, you have to feel, what is the emotional belief, or feeling? And you have to translate the feeling into a belief. Let's say, something, happens and you don't like the results and you're kind of down about it, and you don't know if you're down on yourself or, if you're, down on the situation or, but there's some kind of, suffering attached to, the memory of this, right? And so you have to see, what is that suffering coming from? Because it's most likely coming from a wrong concept. So you have to feel the feeling until you can translate that feeling into the words, the belief that's underlying that feeling. Does that make sense? And then the second step is to set your intellectual ideas straight. So then you want to say, okay, so this is what this energy, emotion, feeling, belief feels. What's the truth? So the guide is always asking us, that like we have to ask ourselves, what is the truth? So we have to know, what do we feel? And then we have to ask, well, is that belief, is that feeling the truth? And then from there, usually we have some understanding of spiritual reality, of spiritual law that can help us guide our intellectual ideas as well, or sometimes just our gut feeling or our heart, our intuition. And then maybe other times we don't know and we have to wait or study or ask spirit to reveal it, but that's the journey, is to discover what is true. And then it's most important to understand that the proper formation of the intellectual concept should not be superimposed. We don't just, you do like, that's the truth. So you push away or brush over or reject the emotional false concept, which is what we do unconsciously all the time. Like we have the correct thought come in and it immediately shames us and we reject the old thought, and that's not going to heal. That's not, we have to actually hold both of them simultaneously and bring the truth with compassion to the confusion, right? And not judge the confusion in ourselves. And to recognize, yeah, you don't believe that, but some part of you does, right? Or some energy consciousness with you does. So, it's like, don't just deny this just because you also have the truth in you, right? Because this place is coming up, is being revealed for the purpose of transformation. And so we have to, bring the truth to it in a way, but it's not where it should be superimposed. That superimposition would only cause suppression. Realize that because they're to suppressed wrong concepts have to evolve clearly into consciousness, formulate the right concept, and then these two should be compared. You need constantly to check how much you still deviate emotionally from the right intellectual concept. So even though I know God loves me, or God's with me all the time, it's like I'm still, wake up and feel, when I read about the wars or whatever, feel scared and feel like, I don't know if we're gonna, what's gonna happen, or, if I'm gonna have enough money to go through retirement or whatever, what's gonna happen as I die, it's like we're always facing, all of that. So, all of these things still, are alive within us, our humanness, our inner child aspects. And so, when they come up, we don't want to just correct them, right, by the truth. We want to like lovingly help them understand and see if they can receive that truth. And if not, what's in the way, right? Because we want to see if we can help them and ourselves, them, us, to truly, align. And where, we're not, it's a part of our own consciousness that we're working with. So it says, do this quietly without inner haste or anger at yourself, that your emotions do not follow your thinking as quickly as you would like. Give them time to grow. This is best accomplished by constant observation and comparison of the wrong and the right concept. Realize that your emotions need time to adjust. So this is where, we're never kind of, again, superimposing, forcing. We recognize the discrepancy between what we know is true and what we can live, that what we can embody fully, what we can react, how we respond instead of react, and we're still reacting maybe instead of responding from this place of wisdom. And so, we don't judge that. We just recognize that that's the practice, and it takes a bit, before we can really imprint this in our soul substance and, transform our inner energy systems around this. And we need to realize that our emotions have to take time to adjust and have, resistance that we have to observe in order to, recognize what it needs in order to change and grow. And so it's never a battle of will within us, but always this uncovering and curiosity and seeking more excavation and understanding. So the lower self of the human personality is very shrewd. So it may, try to get away with things and stuff like that. But again, we have to be afraid of that, okay, so it does, then if it keeps doing that, we're going to wake up to it, right? Oh, I see what you're doing now. And then we can understand, well, why are you doing that? Or why are you so resistant to aligning? And how can I deepen my, intention and my desire and my alignment and intention to align with God more fully? Because we also need to do that imprinting, and we have to remember God, and we have to really connect with that real God as much as we possibly can. And so, where we can be in the presence of nature and in the presence of our own self in meditation and all of that kind of thing, it's very useful and helpful. So the injustices in the world are so often ascribed to God, my friends. And I don't know if we do this a lot more anymore. This came in the,
Darlene, I can't
yeah.
hear you.
Oh, I wonder why. Can you hear me now?
Who is it?
You.
Oh,
Are
is
you
it?
hearing me now, Skylar?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know what just happened. I guess maybe I just signal went out for a second. So, um, yeah, these injustices in the world, again, our emotions may feel like, well, why doesn't God, prevent these kinds of things from happening? And if you are convinced of injustice, the best attitude is to examine your own life and find in it how you have contributed to and even caused happenings that seemed entirely unjust. And again, this isn't God punishing you, right? But this is kind of a natural cause and effect that we sometimes are not aware of, where we're in violation of spiritual law and just don't even recognize it, right? So the better you understand the magnetic force of images and the powerful strength of all psychological and unconscious currents, the better will you understand and experience the truth of these teachings, and the more deeply will you be convinced that there is no injustice. Find the cause and effect of your inner and outer actions. God is not unjust. If you make half the effort you usually make when finding others' faults to find your own, you will see the connection with your own law of cause and effect, and this alone will set you free. You will show you that there is no injustice. This alone will show you that it is not God, nor the fates, nor any unjust world order wherein you have to suffer the consequences of other people's shortcomings, but our own ignorance, our fear, our pride, our egotism that directly or indirectly caused that which seemed so far to come your way without your attracting it. Now, this is where, like the self-responsibility can get into this slippery slope of, like being into blame or, like control, right? Oh, if I'm responsible, that means I should have avoided it. I'm to blame for it, and then we have shame, etc. So it's kind of tricky concept to understand that we can be 100% responsible for something without having any any blame for it. And you can see this sometimes if you can go back and remember who you were at the time when you made these decisions, and you recognize that ultimately this, the actions and the decisions, were maybe not the best, or may have caused consequences, but at the time you were doing the best you knew, right? And so there's this way that we just have to realize that we're here in a learning curve and we're growing, and it's our own imperfections bouncing off of other people's imperfections, and it's not like they're perfect or anything, but where we have the fulcrum of empowerment is when we can take that part of self-responsibility and become really the creator of your life. And emotions are very powerful creative forces, especially because your unconscious affects the unconscious of other persons. And this, you may also become aware of, like what's, like a lot of times you don't think you're doing anything, but if you have sort of some defense or some negativity that's activated in you, you may be thinking it's well masked and you're, acting nice, but people are still picking up on that and reacting to it, right? So this truth is perhaps most relevant to the discovery of how you call forth happenings in your life, good or bad, favorable or unfavorable. And once you experience this, you can dissolve your God image, whether you fear God because you believe that you live in a world of injustice and are afraid of being the prey of circumstances over which you have no control, or whether you reject self-responsibility and expect an indulgent, pampering God to lead your life for you, make decisions for you, take self-inflicted hardships from you. And the realization of how you cause the effects of your life will dissolve either God image. This is one of the main breaking points. So, the self-responsibility, and not again just that concept, but the actual understanding of how you did it, right? Like to recognize, oh, that negative attitude in me, like they probably read that even though I was just pissed off at something else, they probably felt like I was, pissed off at them, and then they attacked me, So, it kind of like, we have to be aware that things are not just on the conscious level, but there's all this unconscious communication and these currents going on that we're feeding into and drawing off of different timelines. I was listening to something again by Metatron recently that was talking about how we have, anywhere, usually most of us, between 100 and 200 different timelines that we're drawing from and influencing us in any given lifetime. So, it's like there's a lot going on here. And so then if we can look towards discovering what the true concept of God is, this will help. And so God's laws are made once and for all and work automatically, so to speak. Think of God as being among so many other things. So this is kind of an impersonal God, like life force, law, it's like things are just happening. Think of God as of an electric current endowed with supreme intelligence. And this electric current is there in you, around you, outside of yourself. And it is up to you how you use it. You can use electricity for constructive purposes, even for healing, or you can use it to kill. That does not make the electric current good or bad. You make it good or bad. This power current is one important aspect of God and is the one that touches you most. This concept may raise the question whether God is personal or impersonal, directing intelligence or law and principle. Human beings, since they experience life with a dualistic consciousness, tend to believe that either the one or the other is true. Yet God is both. But God's personal aspect does not mean personality. God is not a person residing in a certain place, though it is possible to have a personal God experience within the self. For the only place God can be looked for and found is within, not in any other place. God's existence can be deduced outside of the self from the beauty of creation, from the manifestations of nature, from the wisdom collected by philosophers and scientists. But such observations become an experience of God only when God's presence is felt first within. The inner experience of God is the greatest of all experiences because it contains all desirable experiences. So it's the love of God that makes us happy, right? In the long run, it's like this is really the thing that we're seeking, is this direct encounter. And this particular feeling experience might be called the cosmic feeling. The cosmic feeling is not a theoretical understanding or a feeling about the cosmos. It is a true physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual experience which encompasses the entire person. I cannot describe this experience adequately within the limitation of human language. The cosmic experience no longer splits off feeling from thinking. It is feeling and thinking in one. This is very hard to imagine when you have never had such an experience. But some of you may have occasionally had a glimpse of it. Sort of reminds me of that experience one time that you had in a work here. Skylar, do you remember? Some of you may have occasionally had a glimpse of it. The oneness is total. It is an experience of bliss, the comprehension of life and its mysteries, all-encompassing love, a knowledge that all is well and there is nothing to fear. In the state of cosmic feeling, you experience the immediacy of the presence of God within. The immediacy of this incredibly powerful presence is at first shocking. The good feeling is shocking. It is as if literally an electrical shock went through your entire system. Therefore, the ego personality has to grow sufficiently strong and healthy so that it can acclimatize itself to the higher vibrations of the inner presence of God. This manifestation is then experienced as your eternal reality and state, as your true identity. The moment you find yourself in this state, you know in a most profound way that what you now discover you have always known, that you had only temporarily cut yourself off from the state of feeling and knowing, of experiencing and perceiving life as it really is. This description is, of course, extremely limited, for words cannot convey the experience. What you can do at this very moment to gain an inkling of the reality is to pray to be able to perceive a taste of it. Open your inner faculties, your higher self, to an understanding on the deepest level, my friends. So, eternal divine laws. God's love is not only personal in God manifest within the human soul, but also in the divine laws, in the being of the laws, the apparently impersonal love in the laws that are. Understand what is implied in the words that are. Clearly show in the fact that they are made in such a way as to lead you ultimately into light and bliss, no matter how much you deviate from them. The more you deviate from them, the more you approach them by the misery that the deviation inflicts. This misery will cause you to turn around at one point or another, some sooner, some later, but all must finally come to the point where they realize that they themselves determine their misery or bliss. This is the love in the law. This is the plan of salvation. Deviation from the law is the very medicine to cure the pain caused by the deviation, and therefore it brings you closer to the goal, union with God. God lets you deviate from the universal laws if you so wish. You are made in God's likeness, meaning that you are completely free to choose. You are not forced to live in bliss and light, though you can if you wish. And you're not bad when you choose not to, right? You're choosing and learning in your choices. All this expresses the love of God. When you have difficulty in understanding the justice of the universe and the self-responsibility in your own life, do not think of God as he or she. Rather, think of God as the great creative power at your disposal. It is not God who is unjust. The injustice is caused by the wrong use of the powerful current at your disposal. If you start from this premise and meditate on it, from now on you will seek to find where and how you have ignorantly abused the power current in you. God will answer you. This I can promise. If you can find the cause and effect in your life, you have no idea what this discovery will mean to you. The greater the resistance to it at first, the greater the victory. You have no inkling how free it will make you, how safe and secure. You will understand the marvel of the creation of these laws that let you, with the power current of life, do as you please in creating your own life. And this will give you confidence and the deep absolute knowledge that you have nothing to fear. The universe is a whole of which humanity is an organic part. To experience God is to realize oneself as an integral part of this oneness. Take a minute, just even now, can you even conceive of your integral oneness and part of this totality? Yet in their present inner state of development, most human beings can only experience God under the dual aspects of spontaneously active consciousness and automatic law. In actuality, these two aspects form an interacting unity. The aspect of spontaneous consciousness is the active principle, which in human terms is called the masculine aspect. It is the life force which creates. It is potent energy. This life force permeates the entire creation and all creatures, and it can be used by all conscious living beings. So just feel your life force, in this moment now. Feel this energy of being alive that you are aware of inside of your being. The aspect of autonomic law is the passive, receptive principle, the life substance or feminine aspect, which the creative principle molds, forms, and plays upon. The guide sometimes calls it the soul substance that the creative principle, impresses. These two aspects together are necessary to create anything. They are the conditions of creation are present in every form of creation, whether it be a galaxy or a simple gadget. When speaking of God, it is important to understand that all divine aspects are duplicated in a human being who lives and whose being rests upon the same conditions, principles, and laws as those pertaining to cosmic intelligence. They are both the same in essence, differentiated only by degree. Self-realization then means activating the maximum potential of God in oneself. Any comments or, this is like, I think, a very beautiful, sort of a study of, these different aspects of the real God. And just notice how they land in you if you resonate, if you have some inner sense of knowing this, even where you may not know how you know it, right? And also maybe you have some direct experiences of this in your own life. God is in you and creates through you. God, as deliberate, spontaneous, directing intelligence, does not do for you, but through you, being in you. It is very important that you understand this subtle but decisive difference. So this is kind of interesting, because we often, we've learned to pray from the child consciousness, to ask God outside of us for, help with something, right? And I think, we do have angelic forces outside of us and we can call on them, right? And the light, but we also have this light and these forces in us. And if we can think of, God doing not for us, but through us, being in us, then, we can, let go of, we can kind of activate the aspect of God within us, without this dependency thing of expecting God to act for us. And then resenting the inevitable disappointments, when we pray and we didn't get what we wanted, right? Hence you conclude that there is no creator, right? When we seek and we ask and we pray and then we don't receive. So if one could contact an outer deity, one could logically expect it to act for one. But waiting for responses outside the self means focusing into the wrong direction. When you contact God within the self, responses must come. And what is more, you will notice and understand them. Such manifestations of God's presence within the self demonstrate God's personal aspect. They demonstrate active, deliberate, directing intelligence, forever changing and fresh, adapted in infinite wisdom to any situation. So again, by being present in the moment to that situation, that adaptive infinite wisdom can, speak to us, can be our intuition, can be what moves us, right? They express the spirit of God manifesting through the spirit of the human being. When you discover yourself and consequently the role you play in creating your fate, you truly come into your own. You are no longer driven, but are master of your life, no longer bound by forces you do not understand. You can deliberately use these powers in the most constructive way, express more of the best of you, expand to ever greater potentials, add more to life, and therefore derive more from it. You must discover this power and the freedom to master your life by yourself. If life forced you into your true birthright in order to save you from suffering, you would never be a free creature. The meaning of freedom implies that no force or constraint can be used, not even for good or desirable results. So again, we think, we know we should go on a diet or we should eat better or whatever, but if we're doing that from the outer will, trying to force ourselves, there's not a good or desirable result that's going to come from that. Not even the greatest of all discoveries on the road of your evolution would have any meaning if you were compelled to experience it. We have to make this choice of our inner free will from our inner intention, and we have to, find the willingness and remove the blocks to that willingness to, go forward in that direction within us. So the choice to turn in the direction that will finally yield true freedom and power must be left to each individual. Self-discovery, first on the mundane, so-called psychological level, when followed through, must lead to the realization you are master over the universe to the exact degree that you master yourself. This self-mastery depends on a thorough knowledge of yourself and on the depth and width of the concepts your mind is capable of embracing. Since you are created in the image of God, you too must create. You constantly do so, whether you know it or not. You create your life, your fate, your experiences, every thought, every reaction, every motion, every response, every intent, every action, every opinion, every motivation is a creative process. When one is torn in contradiction and conflicts between mutually exclusive motivations, when one fluctuates between automatic blind reflexes and deliberate action, the result of all this is one's own creation. Ideas, intent, thoughts, will, feelings, attitudes are expressed by conscious beings. These are the greatest forces in the universe. This means that the power of spirit is superior to all other energies. If this power is understood and used according to its inherent law, it supersedes all other manifestations of power. No physical power can be as strong as the power of spirit. Since the human being is spirit and intelligence, he or she is inherently capable of directing all automatic blind law. It is through this capacity that God is truly experienced. So I don't know, it sounds here like, this kind of ultimate promise of, spirituality, freeing ourselves from the limitations of the physical and the materiality, which is part of, the vibration of the lower self comes from our identification just with being material beings and not realizing that we are also spirit and feeling like the only important thing is the material realm. And so, here, he's saying, that we really truly are this larger spirit that is, capable of mastering the material world. And it's, in that the capacity that God can be truly experienced. When you deliberately contact and request your higher self, which contains all divine aspects, for guidance and inspiration, and when you experience the result of this inner act, you will know that God is present within you. So, in some ways we're asking the God within for what we need. And we're trying to plug in to that God that is both within us, but greater than us and beyond us. And that causes us to also be sort of that ultimate torus, right? Inner and outer, one and the same, much greater, much vaster than our little human self. And yet here is where we, bring God into the world. So, my dearest friends, find out what distorted image you have of God that stands in the way of your God experience as the total blissful cosmic feeling it is in reality. Make yourself open to it. May the words I am giving you bring light into your soul, into your life. Let them fill your heart. Let them be an instrument to liberate you from illusions. I bless each one of you individually and as a whole. God's world is a wonderful world, and there is only reason to rejoice on whatever plane you live, whatever illusions or hardships you temporarily endure. Let them be a medicine for you and grow strong and happy with whatever comes your way. Be blessed, be in peace, be in God. Okay, so that's that. Let's see what our next chapter is. Unity and duality. That's a good one. Okay. So any comments or final discussions? I guess we lost one of us just recently.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you, Darlene. We're all God's kids, and just being an instrument of that light is what I think the whole thing is about.
Yeah. Yeah. And the more that we can understand, that and really embrace ourselves in that, I think that the more our shame and our self-judgment can fall by the wayside and we can find true humility, like, we're messed up in a lot of ways. We're imperfect, but, we have a longing, to bring this wisdom, this love, this, beauty, this, larger intelligence, into this world and also into our own lives to, become the, the director in a sense, to help us to learn to navigate. And then, yeah, I don't know, I think for a long time still, all of us that are awakening are here, just to help others, right? And so, we're learning this whole new understanding, and we just have to kind of find in our own lives, each of us ways that we would share, our own development, and, like to have peace be peace, and to try to bring this divine resource into our own lives, but for ourselves, but also, as a demonstration and as a, calming influence and all of those kinds of things. So I think we're still going to be for I can remember at one point I thought, well, if this whole new age thing is supposed to kind of happen in a twinkle of an eye, which seemed to be indicated at one point in time, I couldn't figure out, well, what do we do afterwards? But if that is going to happen or whatever, like the final endpoint or the total turning or whatever, it's going to be a while. And I think that there's a lot of, witnessing and holding of love and, becoming those channels that, we're learning, in this lifetime how to truly do that and activate our own gifts and, aspects of God that we uniquely carry and have brought in to be in service of our love. So very good. How about you, Lori? How did you like this? Okay.
Yeah, I feel like it feels like there's some heavy lifting in it.
Some heavy lifting in it.
Yeah.
A lot of different concept, a lot of depth and yeah. When you say that, can you be more specific what you're referring to?
I
So,
can I can witness there are moments where I can like really just feel when you were reading through it, it's like, ow, the pain that these are thoughts I've been dealing with in this kind of spiritual thinking is, oh yeah, so I can't help but get hung up on the blame part and then remembering, oh, that's the lower self using that to bring out shame and rage. And oh, now sit, Lori, I'm like, Lori, just sit in the pain. The pain is just like, it's just twinges of energy that radiate. And it's like, okay, so the pain is the pain of allowing and accepting versus the resistance. And it's like, oh, and then I could see my logical self saying, this is never going to end because logically, and it's like, holy cow, there's just so many different dimensions, so
that sounds like a very beautiful meditation with it that you were doing and and there it's like in a way it's a deep spiritual battle that we're in, right? For all of these ways that our thoughts attack right? Or try to take us down, or make us less than, or shame us, and again, it's part of that, that we're really trying to even wake up to, like, okay, so those forces that are shaming me, like at some level, even, they're still, looking to try to fix you so you don't ever shame anybody again, or you don't shame yourself again, right? Like if you were just perfect, or if and so from that place, again, they're just scared children, trying to protect themselves. And so sometimes we can actually, from the higher self, have compassion for sort of the self-destructiveness of those thought forms, and of that, energy of shame in us, by just holding compassion for ourselves, right? To me, that's like the kind of key antidote to everything, is to try to see if we can meet it, with this open-hearted compassion, like, oh, I recognize that feeling. I know how it is. It's sad. That's tragic. I'm sorry that, you feel you need to shame me, or you want, you believe that this shame is, something that you have to carry, or, and, just keep, like you said, a beautiful, just, it is just a sensation, and the thought that you're going to have to experience it forever, right? The guy talks, yeah, be aware, like, again, it's like this tendency that the ego mind has to, awfulize it. It's going to last forever. It's going to be way bigger than I can handle, like it's kind of like exaggerates and dramatizes everything. And again, we can, that's our child nature, so we can feel ashamed about our childlikeness, but I think, that's where we're trying to ally with that, and not just, we are children, it's like in so many ways, and we didn't have any help taking these parts of our children into a more mature consciousness in our childhood. So, yeah. And I think, God, I mean, we're just lots of different dimensions and different levels, right? And so certainly not all of us is that messed up child, so to know that, God really does see us, and when we see ourselves, I like when I, look inside and I say, I see you, meaning some part of me, which, it feels, like a real beautiful way of meeting myself, right? And trying to stay with just being curious and present to it, rather than feeling like I need to judge it. I don't know what that transformation is, but I know that with practice, more and more it can happen, where we, no longer have those invasive, shaming, painful thoughts that attack us. So, I do know what it's like to, have them kind of constantly harassing and buzzing around you too. But, I think when they're there, all we can do is, be aware consciously, and know that they don't hold truth. They don't hold all truth anyway. They may have some truth that they feel is active, and sometimes it helps to understand, what are you reacting to? Right? But only, to not align with, but to try to help unravel it. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for sharing with me. And yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You
Yep.
guys have a good night.
Too. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.